My name is Brielle Hartman. I always thought that if I did the right thing, everything would fall into place. If I kept my head down, handled the mess, and took care of everyone, the world would make sense. At least that's what Mom always said. Being a good daughter, she'd call it. And I believed her. But that's the thing. Sometimes the right thing isn't right for you. Sometimes it's just survival. Dad had his vices. Drinking, gambling, the kind of things that make people disappear into themselves. I never expected much from him. But when Mom passed, I didn't have a choice. Someone had to keep this family afloat. Someone had to make sure Kelsey could still go to college, even if that meant I gave up everything to make it happen. I became the go-between, the glue that kept everything from falling apart. The bills got paid, the debts sorted, and dreams like mine, the ones I'd tucked away, remained hidden in boxes I couldn't open. It didn't matter, because Kelsey needed it, and I wasn't going to let her go without. But I couldn't help. I resented her for it. I resented how she never seemed to understand how much I was giving up. Every time she talked about her future, the one she was building with all the freedom I never had, I would smile through clenched teeth. I could never say it out loud. Not when she was my baby sister. Not when Mom would have scolded me for feeling that way. And then came the day Dad passed. I thought I was ready. But that day, I realized something. I'd been carrying this weight all along, and now I was expected to carry everything else too. But I didn't have to anymore. Something was about to change. I didn't know what or how, but I felt it. And maybe, just maybe, I was done surviving. When Dad died, I couldn't even cry. I should have, right? A daughter should cry when her father dies. But I didn't. Not at first. It was almost like his death was just the final piece of a puzzle that I'd been piecing together for years. I wasn't sad. I was tired. Tired of waiting for him to be the dad I needed. Tired of cleaning up his messes, paying off his debts, dealing with his empty promises. The funeral was a blur. The usual people came. Distant relatives who barely knew him but still felt obligated to show up. I stood in the back of the room, just another person at an event I had no interest in. I wasn't there for closure. I was there to make sure everything went smoothly, like I always did. My sister Kelsey, she cried. Real tears. But I couldn't help but think, what would she have done without me? I kept glancing at the old pictures they put on display. Dad, young and carefree, before he became the man I barely knew. And I thought about all those years of trying to make things work, of trying to get him to see me, trying to make him proud. But no matter what I did, he never saw me. Not really. And now he was gone. And there was just this empty space that didn't feel like grief. It felt like a giant gaping hole that I didn't know how to fill. At the wake, Kelsey was talking to her friends, laughing like she hadn't just lost a parent. My stepmother was, as usual, playing the part of the grieving widow. But behind her false tears, I could see the real concern in her eyes. She was already thinking ahead. What would happen to the house? To the money? To the inheritance? It wasn't about Dad anymore. It was about what came next. And me? I just wanted to get it all over with. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to be the one to clean up the mess. The will reading was almost anticlimactic. It should have been a moment of truth, a final testament to my father's life, but instead, it felt like one last jab. I was prepared for the usual, nothing really for me. Maybe a trinket or two, something to remember him by. But what I wasn't prepared for was the lake house. When the lawyer called my name and said my father had left me the lake house, I froze. There was no warm, sentimental reaction. No surprise. It was just weird. The house wasn't just a house. It was everything my father had failed to maintain, a symbol of his broken promises, the one thing he'd kept hidden from everyone, including me. But there it was, and suddenly, it was mine. Kelsey looked like she'd been slapped. She fought to keep her composure, but her face turned pale, then red, then pale again. My stepmother, she fainted. I don't know if it was real or just theatrics. Either way, she fell into the arms of the lawyer, playing the part of the fragile, widow-like. She always did. I should have felt something, anything, but I didn't. Not in the way they expected. What was I supposed to feel? Anger? Relief? I didn't know. The house wasn't the inheritance I had imagined. It wasn't a symbol of love or even ownership. It was just a burden wrapped in a bow. But it was mine. The lawyer handed me the papers, the documents that confirmed it, and suddenly, everything I'd been running from felt like it was closing in on me. "I'm sure it's what your father would have wanted," my stepmother said, her voice dripping with that fake sympathy. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or maybe both. What he would have wanted? She never gave a damn about what he wanted. She only cared about what she wanted. I should have told her no. I should have handed back the house and walked away. But something inside me snapped. And I didn't. Not this time. 2 days after the will reading, they showed up at my door. Kelsey was with her, her eyes red from crying. But I knew it wasn't real. The tears, the pleading, it was all part of the act. My stepmother had a way of making everything feel like a stage play, and I was supposed to be the villain this time. "You know, Brielle," my stepmother started, her voice smooth, calculated. "It's what your father would have wanted. You're the one he trusted with the house." The words were laced with an almost pitying sweetness, but I could hear the demand behind them, the entitlement. They thought I was weak, that I would just roll over like I always did. They thought wrong. Kelsey, standing beside her, nodded vigorously, her hands twisted in front of her like she was praying for me to agree. "It would solve everything," she added, trying to look sincere. "I'm struggling with my mortgage." "You know that," I nodded, pretending to listen, pretending to care, but I wasn't stupid. They weren't here for a family discussion. They were here to tell me what I should do, what they expected me to do. "You should sell the house, Brielle," my stepmother continued, almost patronizing in her tone. "Take the money, pay off Kelsey's mortgage. You'll both be free of that burden, and think of the peace it would bring. Peace, that's what they wanted, peace for them, to relieve them of their own failures and debts. Not peace for me, peace for the woman who had spent years convincing herself she could be the good daughter, while I did all the heavy lifting. But I wasn't about to be the martyr anymore. I refused. Politely at first, just as I had always done. "No, I won't sell. Not the house. Not for anyone." They didn't like that. Kelsey's face dropped, and my stepmother's eyes flashed with something I'd never seen before. Something ugly. She tried to cover it, but I knew. She'd just lost control. And when she realized I wasn't budging, the real game began. It wasn't enough to just ask. No. They needed more. They needed to break me. So, they sued me. I should have been surprised. But I wasn't. Not really. Not after everything they had already put me through. It was the next logical step. If they couldn't get me to bend with words, they'd try with force. Kelsey and my stepmother walked into that courtroom, their eyes filled with a false sense of righteousness. They weren't there for justice. They were there to make me pay. The lawsuit was long, tedious, and brutal. The accusations were ridiculous. They called me selfish, cold-hearted, the kind of person who would deny family what was rightfully theirs. My stepmother, ever the actress, played her part perfectly. She'd tell the court how I had always been the one to take control of everything, how I'd even forced her out of important decisions. It was like listening to a broken record, only now it was being played on a grand stage, with a judge watching. Kelsey stood by her, looking so small, so fragile, like a child who just wanted to be taken care of. But there was no real innocence behind her eyes. I knew that look, the pleading, the manipulation, and I could see my father's influence all over her. Too young, too dependent, too focused on what others could do for her. I didn't want to fight. I didn't. But I was starting to feel something new, a fire, a rage I hadn't recognized before. This wasn't about the lake house. It wasn't even about the money. It was about something bigger. It was about the years I had spent keeping, the peace, being the good daughter. But no one had ever asked me if I wanted to be that person. So I fought, quietly, with every document, every piece of evidence I had. I watched their lies unravel in front of me, piece by piece. No speeches, no big scenes, just facts. And for the first time, I let myself stand tall. I wasn't going to let them take everything. Not this time. I didn't expect to find what I did. I was just sorting through some old family files, trying to make sense of all the paperwork that had accumulated over the years. But then I came across something that made my blood run cold. A stack of papers I hadn't noticed before, buried deep in a file cabinet my father had kept locked. At first, I thought it was just more junk, more of his unfinished business. But when I started reading, it hit me like a ton of bricks. The lake house. The one thing my father had left behind. The thing everyone thought was his last great asset. It wasn't just his. It was mine. I had been co-owner of the property all along. My father had transferred ownership to both of us years ago, without telling anyone, without mentioning it in the will. It wasn't a simple inheritance. It was a partnership. The house, the land, it had always been mine too. And there, in black and white, was the proof. Deeds, transfers, documents, everything I needed to make it clear that my father hadn't just left me the house. He had made sure I was its rightful owner alongside him. And now it was mine. Not just because he died, but because he had given it to me. My heart pounded as I read the documents over and over again, like I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. It was like my father had left me a final gift, a quiet act of defiance, against the people who had tried to manipulate him, to manipulate me. All those years of taking care of everything, being the responsible one, and now I finally had something to call my own. No one could take that from me. I wanted to go straight to them, shove the papers in their faces, but I knew better. I had to stay calm. I had to be smart. This was it. This was the moment that changed everything. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The court date came and went in what felt like a haze. I wasn't prepared for the way I felt standing there. I thought I'd be nervous, overwhelmed. But I wasn't. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long had lifted the moment I discovered the truth. I wasn't just fighting for the lake house anymore. I was fighting for myself. They came at me with everything they had. My stepmother, with her polished words, claimed I was being unreasonable, selfish. She painted me as a daughter who couldn't let go. A woman who would rather watch her family suffer than share what was rightfully theirs. Kelsey, her face pale and vulnerable, stood beside her, pleading for fairness, pleading for me to be the good daughter I'd always been. They used my own history against me, twisting my past into a story of bitterness, of cruelty, but I didn't fight back the way they thought I would. There was no dramatic rebuttal, no speech where I bared my soul. Instead, I handed the judge the documents, all of them, the deeds, the papers, the proof that I was co-owner of the house. And I let the silence settle in. It was almost too easy. My stepmother's face went pale, her words choking in her throat. Kelsey, still playing the role of the helpless sister, faltered for the first time. The court didn't need me to speak. The evidence did all the talking. All those years of pretending, all the emotional manipulation. They couldn't cover up the truth anymore. The judge didn't need a grand speech either. His ruling was quiet, almost detached, but it was clear. The lake house was mine, and I didn't have to share it with anyone. And in that moment, I realized that all those years of holding my tongue, of being the good daughter, had prepared me for this one simple truth. I was not their scapegoat. I was not their pawn. I was the one in control now. It wasn't the ruling that got to them. It wasn't the papers or the courtroom drama. It was the moment they opened the envelope, the eviction notice. I had them sent out, just as a formality. It wasn't personal. It was business. After all, the house wasn't theirs anymore, and the court had ruled in my favor. But when they got that notice in the mail, something inside me shifted. I didn't even have to do anything. They had already lost. The realization hit them, hard. Kelsey's face crumpled, her hands shaking as she stared at the notice. My stepmother's eyes flickered between anger and disbelief, trying to hold on to some thread of control. "You can't do this," Kelsey said, her voice cracking. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. There was no fury in my heart, no desire for revenge. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about taking back what was mine, about standing tall for once in my life. They could blame me all they wanted. They could scream, they could plead, but it wouldn't change a damn thing. I didn't go to the house when they started packing. I didn't need to. They were already starting to leave, a slow, painful realization dawning on them. My stepmother clutched a stack of old family photos, probably trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Kelsey carried boxes, but the lightness had gone from her step. The burden of it all, the debts, the guilt, the manipulation, was finally crushing them. And me? I was just standing there, watching, calm, collected. I felt a strange sense of peace that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't the girl they thought would crumble. I wasn't the one who would give in. No. I was the one who had taken back everything they'd tried to take from me. They could pack up the house, but I'd already packed up my past. I was done. The sound of boxes being stuffed into the back of a car was strangely soothing. There was something quiet, almost final about it. My stepmother was hissing orders at Kelsey, but it was different now. The facade was crumbling. The control she used to wield so easily, over my father, over Kelsey, over me, was slipping. The power dynamic had shifted, and she didn't know how to react. I stayed outside, just watching them from the porch. Kelsey didn't look at me. She couldn't. She couldn't meet my eyes without seeing the truth. All those years she'd leaned on me, the way she had always assumed I would be there to fix everything. She was finally realizing I wasn't her safety net anymore. My stepmother, on the other hand, couldn't quite bring herself to let go. She walked around, muttering to herself, trying to gather the last of the things she'd once called hers. The house, the memories, the power she thought she had. But none of it was hers anymore. Not the house. Not my father. Not even me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The silence between us spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. They had tried to manipulate me, control me, make me feel small. But now, I was the one in control. Watching them struggle, I felt something stir inside me. A deep, powerful sense of pride. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking back. I wasn't apologizing for standing up for myself. They wanted me to back down, to give in to their version of what I should be. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. Kelsey wasn't crying now. She wasn't pleading. She was just packing up her things, looking defeated. And my stepmother, she wasn't the woman I'd once feared. She was just another person who couldn't control me anymore. I was done being the girl they thought they could use. It's strange, standing there on the porch, watching the last of my family drive away. The house that was once a prison for all, my unspoken emotions now feels like a sanctuary. The air is different, cleaner somehow. It's mine. Not just because the papers say so, but because I've claimed it. I've earned it, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm living on borrowed time. I walk inside, and it's quiet. No more arguments, no more expectations. Just silence. I look around at the walls that used to feel like a cage. They're just walls now. I used to think that if I could just fix everything, if I could just keep everything together, maybe, just maybe, I'd find peace. But now, I know peace doesn't come from fixing the messes of others. It comes from letting go of the need to be everything for everyone else. I take a deep breath, looking out over the lake. The water is still, the kind of stillness I've been searching for without even realizing it. There's no noise, no pressure. I don't owe anyone anything anymore. Not my stepmother, not Kelsey, not even my father, who tried to shape me into something I wasn't. It's just me now, and I'm enough. The world won't always be kind to me. I know that. But it doesn't matter. I'm not scared of it anymore. I don't need anyone's approval. I don't need to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. I've learned the hard way that sometimes you have to let go of what's not yours. And sometimes you have to stand up, even when no one expects you to. So, as I stand here, in this house that's finally mine, I realize I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living. I'm free. And nothing, no one, can ever take that from me.